What is going on, everyone? Leighton Lithgow here, founder of Lift with Leighton and Synergy Strength Studio. And this is my first ever YouTube video. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to give out some free game. Pretty much explaining exactly how to set up an effective full body split and how to program for yourself in under 5 minutes, right? Because let's face it, coaching is expensive. There's a lot of bullshit out there in terms of programming, in terms of the training styles that a lot of coaches are pushing onto people, particularly in the social media age where we are just seeing more and more sweaty, topless workout videos of guys throwing barbells over racks and doing all kinds of crazy shit, right? And I wanted to break this whole topic down into 3 simple steps, okay? Now, we're going to start off by defining what an effective training split is. For me, an effective training split is one that suits both your goals and your constraints, right? And that is step 1. We need to identify, number 1, what is my goal? Your goal could be pretty much anything, but let's say for argument's sake, we are looking to build as much muscle as possible, right? So we need to operate in a way that optimizes for hypertrophy. And the way we do that is by selecting movements that are low cost and high reward. So if you look about what the antithesis of this would be, let's imagine we've got a barbell clean and jerk, right? It's an excellent movement. It helps develop movement qualities of its own, but it's highly, highly fatiguing on the body and it yields pretty much zero muscle building effect. So that would be a poor choice for hypertrophy. Something that would be a good choice for hypertrophy would be something like a machine because it is already set up. You don't have to spend time setting it up and trying to find the optimal position. There's very, very minimal transactional cost with using a machine. You can just jump on, put the pin to your desired weight and get rolling. There's a fixed path of resistance and there's likely a lot of external stability. And all of those 3 things marry together to make something a good choice for hypertrophy. So using things like machines and cables as opposed to using things like dumbbells and barbells. Not that they are poor choices for hypertrophy, but if we are optimizing for hypertrophy, we want to do the things that are going to yield the most bang for our buck. And so we would select something like, say, a single arm machine preacher curl as opposed to a barbell curl. It's not to say we can't do both, but again, this is in the case of specializing for hypertrophy. We want to also minimize fatigue in other areas of the body. So we know that overall central nervous system fatigue comes from a lot of co-contractions during the movement. And we can take the example of a Bulgarian split squat where we are holding on to nothing but the weight. We are having co-contractions in our abs, in our back, in our shoulders, in our feet. Everything is working really, really hard to help stabilize us against the movement. When if we just had some form of external stability, like holding onto a parallel or onto a bench, or say using a Smith machine, we will greatly reduce those co-contractions, meaning that we are able to target the muscle that we are actually looking to work a lot more effectively. That would make using movements with external stability a really good choice for hypertrophy. So once we've got clear on what our goals are, we then need to get clear on what our constraints are, right? What kind of gym do you have access to? How much time do you have during the week? Because there is 0 point in writing this 2-hour, 5-day split where you actually can't get in the gym for that length of time, or you actually don't have access to half of the equipment needed for it, and you're going to have to be kind of finding subs or just making up your own little weird contraptions to try and do your movements in the gym, okay? We need to make this as smooth as possible. We want to lower the barriers to entry in our training split. So what we want to do is find our constraints and then find ways to move about them. I've got 45 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 4 movements and I am going to do 2 warm-up sets and then I'm going to do 2 working sets. We're going to go low rep and we're going to go really high load and we're going to push all the sets to 1 rep in reserve or failure. That's a really, really efficient way of using your time if you do not have that much of it. Okay, so we will identify our goals, we'll identify our constraints, and that is step 1 complete. We'll then move into step 2, okay? And step 2 is to cut the fluff. Anyone with skin in the game when it comes to training knows that the meat and potatoes of our training are what get you results, okay? High concentrated effort. That means we're not walking into the gym and spending 15 minutes on a cardio machine and then 10 minutes doing activation drills and then warming up from 10 kilos all the way up to 100 kilos, and it's 40 minutes in the gym before we get to our first working set. That is highly, highly inefficient. When we talk about highly concentrated effort, what that means is maybe 1 to 2 movements per muscle group per session, and hitting that with really high intensity. Oftentimes for me, going into the gym, I will do one set of chest, one working set, 2 warm-up sets, but the one set will be really, really fucking intense. We will go to a dark place and then we will move on and we'll warm up into our biceps or into our quads or into our hamstrings. You would be surprised how much of a stimulus you can get from one working set when you really concentrate all your effort into it, as opposed to doing 3 half-assed working sets where you are going to like 5 or 6 reps in reserve and not really seeing any change from it. So really going like an inch wide and a mile deep into your training, that is going to yield an absolutely huge benefit. To think that you need 10 to 20 weekly sets or whatever the outdated science used to tell us to progress and to build muscle is kind of an outdated way of thinking, okay? Because we've got to think of the goal of hypertrophy. What are we trying to do to build muscle? We are trying to recruit the largest motor units in the muscle, and we can do that more effectively with lower reps and with higher loads, okay? And we're trying to do that until we reach our maximum perceived tolerable effort, i.e. the most effort that we can put into a lift whilst keeping our form standardized. So essentially what that means is we are going to train very, very close to failure pretty much all the time, but we don't always go to failure, because always going to failure will fry the central nervous system. So we want to get very close and tap, 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 maybe 1-2 reps in reserve, and then we cut the set short there. Training to failure is a tool to understand where you are at, okay? It should not be the goal of all your training, or you will quickly find yourself depleted, burnt out, and very, very tiring, okay? What we also want to do is remove any limiting factors in our lifts. So if we're optimizing for hypertrophy and we are doing a barbell bent over row, it's not really a great exercise selection, but then we could put some chest support in and we could add some straps, and that would take away the limiting factor of the low back and the limiting factor of the grip, and it would mean that the first thing to fail would be our lats, which is good. That's good news. That's what we are trying to do. So we can really modify any exercise to make it a little bit more optimal for hypertrophy with just a little bit of thought and nuance added to that session. If it was me, I would recommend 4 to 6 movements per session, 2 warm-up sets, 1 to 2 working sets per muscle group, and I will go with 3 sessions per week. For the overwhelming majority of people, that's absolutely fine. For more advanced lifters, you might need an upper-lower split where we have got 4 sessions per week, but you will make really good progress on a full body split if you set it up correctly. Now we get on to step 3, and that is to execute, okay? If something in your program is working in the first few weeks and continues to work, keep it in the program. Too often I see coaches switching things up for the sake of variety, when in actual fact, all they are doing is getting their client to start again from square one. Because what happens when we put new movements into the cycle every 4 weeks all the time is this. Over the first couple of weeks, your client will build the skill of movement in that particular movement. They'll become somewhat proficient at it. Then they will start to progressively overload it. And then what happens is we get to the end of the 4 weeks and we go, right, we're getting off the Smith machine bench press and we're now going to go to a cable fly. And your client may have never have done a cable fly before, but now they have to spend the first 2 weeks acclimating to that movement and then the last 2 weeks maybe progressively overloading it. When in reality, we could have just spent 8 weeks on the Smith machine bench press, seeing really good progressive overload and actually making a difference. If something is not broke, do not fix it, okay? There are certain movements that will stay in my program year round, like Bulgarian split squats, like a dumbbell seated shoulder press, like a tricep supported bicep curl, okay? Plenty of movements are going to work for you pretty much forever. The only time that you should ever switch a movement out is if you are plateauing in that lift, okay? And let's say we plateau in the barbell bench press, we might want to switch to dumbbells and then try and progress through them and then move back to a barbell bench press after a couple of months and see if that's helped us bust through that plateau. Don't just change things up for the sake of it, okay? When things work, they work. There's absolutely no need to just be throwing variety in for variety's sake, okay? If in your training split you are not regularly progressively overloading, then there are a couple of things wrong. Number one, either your training and nutrition is not very good, or number two, your setup is incorrect. You haven't really built a very good training split because there's either too much volume or you can't recover from it. Okay, so we need to really hit the sweet spot. For you to have an effective training split, you need to be dialed in everywhere else. There's no point eating like shit, sleeping like shit, going out, drinking on the weekend, and then going, I've got this optimal training program, but all of a sudden I'm starting to regress in all my movements. That's because you're not optimized anywhere else. You need to make sure you dialed the fuck in with everything else before you even concern yourself with the quality or the content of your training, okay? Just simply being in the gym and putting effort in while everything else is optimal is going to help you see results. But this video is designed to kind of help make sure that you're picking the correct movements and you're not making the same mistakes that a lot of beginners make in the gym. You don't need things like intensifiers, you don't need supersets, you don't need drop sets, you don't need myo reps. Can you use them? Absolutely, you can use them, okay? Will they work? Yes, they will work, of course. They have a history of working, but what's the risk-reward ratio like? Probably not great. It's a lot harder to manage a progressive overload on a drop set. With supersets, you're probably carrying a lot of fatigue from the first movement into the second movement, even if they are antagonists or they're completely separate muscle groups. So these are all things you need to consider. It's much easier to track progressive overload when your training is really simple. And until you become super advanced, you probably don't need to add any of these techniques in at all as well. So that is kind of the long and short of it. I know this was quite a short video, but hopefully there were some gems in there for you all. But the TLDR of this is this: you need to pick movements that you can execute, that you enjoy, and some that are necessary. Number two is you need to make sure, you absolutely need to make sure that everything else is dialed in for you to be able to see progressive overload in the rest of your training. You want to cut the fluff out of your training to make sure that your sessions are as short as possible whilst you are achieving the maximum possible benefit. And the third of which is we need to execute, and we need to do it for a very long time. We need to assess the results, and then we need to look if anything needs changing at all. We change, and then we run right back through step 1, step 2, and step 3. And that's what we just constantly do over and over again for eternity. And that is just how lifting works. So this was my first long form video, really, outside of the podcast. If you like shorter form content, you can find me on Instagram at Lift with Leighton, or TikTok. It's the exact same handle. I also have a weekly newsletter that you can sign up to. The link for that will be in the description of this video. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you could, please like and subscribe to this. Thank you all very much.